Out of all the forms of Yu-Gi-Oh, most duelists probably enjoy the physical card game the most. While other forms like the video games, simulators, and Duel Links can be great at times, there's just something about the in-person Yu-Gi-Oh tournament experience that can't be replicated. Hanging out with friends, reading your opponent's subtle emotions and actions, even flexing with high rarity cards. You don't always get that when playing online. But with that said, Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulators have been imperative to the overall growth of the TCG, as well as thousands of duelists around the world. In this video, I'll be covering the single most important online simulator in Yu-Gi-Oh! History, how it became an absolute beast in terms of popularity and influence, and its tragic and abrupt fall. Be advised, if you're an older Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist like myself, you may not leave this video with a dry eye. Welcome to the rise and fall of Dueling Network. Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulators go back much further than most duelists know. Yu-Gi-Oh! Virtual Desktop, or YVD as we called it, was actually a thing going back as far as 2003. In those DM era days, it gave duelists around the United States a way to connect with each other and find competition when we weren't able to make it to tournaments, or at times when tournaments weren't being held. As someone who used YVD a ton on Friday nights as a teenager, I can tell you firsthand it was incredibly primitive. A lot of times card art didn't load, and you had to give your opponent your IP address so that they could connect with you manually to duel. Sounds insane today, but this was a far different time in terms of technology. As monumental as Dueling Network would eventually become, DN started as nothing more than a side project while a young coder attended college. Dueling Network was created by Christopher Salvarati while he attended school in New Jersey. Chris, or BLS as he would soon be known as in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, always had a deep interest in computers, technology, and coding. Prior to creating DN, he volunteered at the Liberty Science Center in Jersey City, and all through high school was known as somewhat of a computer tech guy. Despite no formal training at this point, Chris designed and maintained his high school track team's website, so even before attempting DN, he had some experience in designing websites. After graduating high school, Chris attended Carnegie Mellon University, where he studied computer science. As you might expect, he was a fan of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, and in those years longed for an easily accessible way to play the game while on a busy college schedule. He had a vision of a dueling website that would replicate the exciting real-life tournament experience, a place where duelists could gather to play and learn the game, but not be limited by obstacles like money or time. Rather than wait for someone to make his dream a reality, he chose to tackle the project himself. He really put a lot of time and thought into it. He had mapped out in his head how he wanted it to look, and had even planned out the gameplay to revolve around his philosophy of making it as realistic as possible.
So, I started this site because I was just in college. I studying computer science, and I thought this would be a cool project to take on.
So you just made this basically as a just a project, just decided I just
had a vision. I imagined a way this site could look approximately. Like I said, someone should just sit down and just program it this way.
BLS might have been able to bring DN to a fully functional level at this time, but doing so wouldn't have been practical. It was one thing to lay down the basics, but running the website while being a full-time student would have been rough. Not to mention, it would have been incredibly difficult to pay for and maintain the servers on a student's budgets. For these reasons and more, DN was basically on ice for the time being. While there were other Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulators at the time, such as YVD and the Kaiba Corporation Virtual Duel System, or KCVDS, Chris aimed to make the definitive and best online dueling simulator. By 2010, YVD was completely outdated as a platform and really wasn't receiving any major overhaul changes to its presentation or functionality, so it was no longer embraced by much of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community. KCVDS looked and worked much better, but it had yet to break through to the masses. Chris took a completely different approach with Dueling Network than previous simulators. YVD and the Kaiba Corp system were both computer programs that had to be downloaded. However, Chris designed DN to be a simulator based from a website. This made DN far easier to access for the average duelist and much simpler for those who weren't technology savvy. Dueling Network simply required an internet browser capable of running Adobe Flash. No downloading, no extracting files, no installs, and much more usable from shared and public computers. If Chris could do this right, he'd have the first dueling sim that almost the entire community would embrace. Chris did all the coding for DN, but of course he would need a solid team. He brought on talented people like Dan Parker, currently the site director for Yugioh organization. While originally Dan was the advisor to the administration team, he would soon become the head administrator himself and be in charge of the entirety of the staff as well as co-developer of all new features. Dan would tell Chris what the site needed and Chris would get to work coding it. The team's primary goal was first and foremost to make the best simulator possible, and their ambitions really showed.
Well,
How do you do it?
I'm just one person. I can't do everything myself, so a key part of leadership is getting other people to help you, going in and putting the responsibility and work on other people. That's why we have this large staff. Dueling Network exists because of all the people that help maintain it. So it's not just me, it's a whole team of people that are working hard to keep the site going.
8 months later, Dueling Network would have its official and unofficial launch in May 2011, and the Yu-Gi-Oh community would be blown away. Aesthetically, DN had a sleek and clean virtual reality look that really captured the online network feel that the name suggests. Parts of DN, like the background and the homepage, appeared to be inspired by movies like Tron. There was also an array of bright colors like red and yellow to contrast the black backgrounds and the gray dueling field. While DN looked magnificent, it also offered duelists a wide variety of features. The ability to customize your avatar, add friends, spectate duels, send private messages, make custom profiles which could be used to let others know who you are, a ranking system, etc., etc. While other sims had some of these features, there was simply no other simulator that compiled them all together in one place. This in itself made DN feel leagues ahead of its contemporaries and like the definitive complete package. Being objective, DN was easily the best sim at the time, but that doesn't mean that it didn't have its fair share of problems. Dueling Network's tendency to completely crash as a site was legendary and was an issue that honestly was a pain for years. You could probably argue that this was a good problem to have, as it usually came from the server being overloaded and running out of bandwidth as too many duelists tried to access the site at the same time. DN would also seldomly have glitches like disappearing cards mid-duel. These were both especially annoying while playing ranked competitive games, but the judge waiting times could be just as bad. Since Dueling Network featured a full competitive rank ladder system, it needed judges to settle mid-duel ruling disputes between players and handle trolls who didn't care about winning at all and just wanted to screw with people. This is of course no different than how real-life tournaments have judges as well. The issue with Dueling Network, like most websites, was it was open 24/7, so if you were playing late enough, there could be maybe 2 or 3 judges online for about 500 people that were playing in games. Lack of judging staff really wasn't Dueling Network's fault, as there are only so many people around who are willing to volunteer their time for this and do it for free.
And you have to remember that our staff is entirely volunteer-based.
DN was successful almost from the very start. Word of mouth spread through the Yu-Gi-Oh forums and YouTube fairly fast and led to thousands of players signing up by the end of 2011. It wasn't just the great design, features, and accessibility that attracted duelists, but the fact that Dueling Network's gameplay was completely manual was also appealing. While some other simulators use in-game programming to have actions automated, every single thing you did while in a DN duel, outside of shuffling, was done by you, the player. This made duels feel incredibly authentic and much more like the real-life experience. This of course meant a steeper learning curve when learning new strategies and decks, but it also meant it would be much easier to learn from and identify your own mistakes. Without computer AI holding your hand while dueling, you were free to forget searches, quick effects, and make all sorts of misplays that would cost you games. This is exactly how it is in real-life Yu-Gi-Oh, so DN was an instant hit with competitive duelists.
Well, there are a few points to why DN is the way it is. First of all, it's made to simulate dueling in real life. It's made to, simulate real-life tournaments or real-life locals or things like that.
From their perspective, DN gave them the ability to test for hours prior to regionals and YCS events from the comfort of their own homes and at any time they chose. Also, they could test decks before they committed to purchasing the physical cards. Dueling Network also greatly benefited from Yu-Gi-Tubers creating content using the platform. Names like Asian Eyes White Dragon, StewDog8, myself, and hundreds of others all had video series exclusively using the platform. Whether it was banned card lists, low-rated duels, or DN duel commentary, videos like these helped tens of thousands of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists learn about the website. There was also a lot of variety in terms of the content that was being posted. This combined with DN's embrace of multiple format ladders created the perfect storm to captivate all types of duelists. Whether you were a YCS champion, someone new to the game, or wanted to keep it old school and only play GOAT formats, Dueling Network's multiple formats and custom rules made it possible for all types of duelists to have fun and succeed, no matter what their skill level or the type of duel they were looking for. In fact, multiple duelists exemplified this over the years, where there were some vocal few in the community who attempted to discredit DN wins as not real Yu-Gi-Oh! Or by saying things like being high rated on DN doesn't actually make you good. Duelists like 902 and NY3 proved how valuable DN was as a resource. Omar 902 Dowdy started by playing DN exclusively for years, and when he entered his first YCS with Burning Abyss in 2014, he made a top 8 finish. NY3 reached the highest recorded ranking in DN history and would later go on to top his country's nationals in New Zealand. As Dueling Network entered its second and third years, its popularity had completely taken off. On the weekends, including Friday nights, it was quite common to see upwards of 10,000 users online at the same time. By the close of 2013, it had over 3 million registered duelists. The numbers were quite frankly staggering, dare I say unbelievable, as I don't think even BLS expected this type of success. Less than 2 short years after its release, and DN was now seemingly the center of the Yu-Gi-Oh! World, a place where thousands of duelists came each day to duel, discuss theory and strategies, talk about random stuff, spectate games, troll each other, make videos about trolling each other. I'm looking at you, X7. Dueling Network had grown into more than just a site to play for Yu-Gi-Oh! DN was now arguably a social network for Yu-Gi-Oh! With all of this exponential growth, the Dueling Network team knew that expansion wasn't just logical, but would also be necessary. To that end, over the next couple of years, DN would heavily upgrade its servers as well as launch the Dueling Network forums. The DN forums were designed to rival other popular Yu-Gi-Oh! Forum sites of the past, such as Pojo and Duelist Grounds. With the forums, DN was able to have a specific place for duelists to banter, theorycraft, and rate each other's decks without clogging up the site's main chat room. I personally wouldn't consider the DN forums a success, as in my personal experience, I never felt like it was as lively as past forum juggernauts, but it did ultimately garner 100,000 registered users in its time, although that number is kind of skewed because DN eventually started auto-signing up new users for the forums when they made accounts for the main site. I think the main reason it wasn't successful, at least in my eyes, is because Yu-Gi-Oh! Forums outside of Reddit were on the serious decline by the time that it was released. DN's upgraded servers were greatly welcomed and necessary. The average active user numbers were off the charts, and BLS wanted a lag-free site. While the financials of Dueling Network have never been made public, and even former staff seemingly won't talk about this, DN did have some known sources of revenue. The site took donations right from the homepage and had partnerships with TCG selling websites. With the donations, DN would receive money from its users in exchange for incentives like being able to use custom-made sleeves and avatar images. These partnerships varied and were often banners and ads of sites that sold Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. The most notable was the TCGplayer.com website integration, which was available whenever you hovered or clicked on a card. This would bring up the current prices of said cards and would allow you to be taken right to the TCG Player website to buy whatever cards you clicked on. While this was largely unknown at the time, this type of affiliate partnership is extremely common nowadays amongst Yu-Gi-Oh! Content creators, especially with this site in particular. So I would infer that Dueling Network received a portion of the sales made through clicking on these cards. As Dueling Network continued throughout the years, nothing seemed to be able to slow down its growth or popularity. There were tons of issues that arose with staffing, but those were always ironed out fairly quickly. There were some controversies with Dueling Network. For example, the creators of the Kaiba Corp Dueling Sim accused BLS of stealing their code. In my research, these accusations were never verified, they really didn't offer up any proof to back up their claims, and the DN staff vehemently refute them. Coding new cards was a fast and swift process which aided Dueling Network's success, as it took just 8 seconds to code individual cards, although new mechanics and features were quite a different story. My understanding is that Master Rule 3 was especially difficult to code because of the addition of new zones and how pendulum monsters functioned in general. With that being said, by 2016, Dueling Network had amassed over 4 million users, and BLS and the admin team had big plans moving forward. Adding new servers, a smoother transition to the next Yu-Gi-Oh mechanic, and finding new ways to grow the site overall were all discussed.
Well, we're kind of going a different direction in terms of our social media aspect, and we thought sprucing up our YouTube would be a good start, where we would essentially have a place that's very dedicated to Dueling Network specific, and we could go and have different users post videos, post games, post Dueling Network discussion, Dueling Network status, essentially very focused on what's going on in the Dueling Network world, as opposed to just general Yu-Gi-Oh stuff that people are interested in. And I think this is the first step.
However, Dueling Network was about to get blindsided in the worst way. Despite not being an officially supported or connected website, Konami never really did anything to try to derail Dueling Network or shut down the site. Of course, they knew about the platform, but they basically ignored it and would never officially acknowledge it. I believe it was one of those "we can't officially support you, but you bring in new players and are technically good for business, so we'll leave you guys alone" type of situations. Another company closely connected with Yu-Gi-Oh, NAS, wasn't so kind. Nihon Ad Systems is a Japanese marketing, management, and international distribution company that holds the copyright for basically all the Yu-Gi-Oh anime franchises. In March 2016, NAS sent a cease and desist order to BLS and Dueling Network. This C&D order demanded that Dueling Network remove all images of Yu-Gi-Oh characters as well as Yu-Gi-Oh cards. For years, DN had allowed users to use dozens of characters from the various Yu-Gi-Oh anime franchises as avatars. As the holder of the Yu-Gi-Oh anime license, NAS claimed that Dueling Network had no right to use the character images or Yu-Gi-Oh card images/likenesses at all without a prior agreement. As DN said on its homepage, it was never officially associated with the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. Clearly nothing of the sort existed. Fans of DN as well as Yu-Gi-Tubers voiced their dismay. Dueling Network staff first attempted to comply with the C&D by removing all images of cards as well as the anime characters from the site. While I'm not a legal expert, in theory, as a fully manual simulator, there shouldn't have been anything technically connecting Dueling Network to the Yu-Gi-Oh property. This fix worked for multiple months, although fans circumvented the DN staff's efforts almost immediately. Fans made extensions on the DN website that would allow you to access the site with lower resolution images. It's unclear if this contributed to NAS's continued C&D efforts, but the removal of images wasn't enough to make them stop, and they pressed on. At this point, NAS was out for blood and wanted a full shutdown of the Dueling Network site. There may have been a legal case for DN to win a lawsuit against NAS. However, fighting against a billion-dollar company with resources that far outweigh yours as a single site ran on donation and partnership money probably isn't going to end well. On July 16, 2016, DN was taken almost completely down. The front page was no longer accessible and now was replaced with, quote, "For legal reasons, Dueling Network will be taken offline until further notice. I apologize for the inconvenience. Note that the third party requesting this takedown was not Konami, but another authorized party," end quote. There were still a few players who were logged onto the site and were able to use its features, but the second they logged out, they would lose that ability forever. Fans were outraged, puzzled, scared, and every other emotion under the sun. The biggest unanswered question in all this was, why now? DN had been online for nearly half a decade when NAS sent the first C&D. Why take action after all this time? Others wondered if they were going to target other dueling simulators, as there were multiple new ones at this time. Ironically, Dueling Network was the only major target. Maybe it was because it was the most popular one, or maybe it was because it was the easiest to access. Regardless, the takedown was successful and Dueling Network never turned its lights on again after that. As DN died on that day, it surely hasn't been forgotten, as even to this day, it remains the most popular simulator of all time and one that brought joy to millions of duelists around the world. An upgraded successor to Dueling Network called Dueling Book was made and released about 6 months after DN's takedown, and that site is fully operational to this day. It has all the features of the old Dueling Network as well as many more that have been added, but the site is honestly nowhere near as popular. I guess sometimes you never truly appreciate something until it's gone. And with that, we are now at the conclusion of our Yu-Gi-Oh story. I'd like to personally thank Dan Parker over at YG Organization for letting me interview him and get lots of information that I used in this video. If you enjoyed the video, or more importantly you learned something, give the video a thumbs up, share it online, and of course subscribe for more videos just like this one in the future.